Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. This week we're gonna be doing a little bit more work on the R35 GTR. But this week, everything we're gonna be doing is cosmetic. Now, as some of you know, I do daily drive my GTR and it has seen track time, which does put some extra stress and kind of shifts some things around with the car, and I kind of want to refresh the front end so it looks a little bit better. I'm gonna be taking care of some stuff that is very, very common on GTRs I've seen besides this one, particularly right here. There's a gap that seems to develop between the fender and the front bumper. Now, you might be thinking that's simply because I have aftermarket fenders, but I've seen it on other GTRs, so I know it's an issue, and I'm going to attempt to see if I can fix that today. The other thing I want to take care of is, if you look at the front lip right here, as you can see, it's separating from the bumper. My guess is some of the bolts have just kind of vibrated out, so I'm going to take off the bumper, take a look at it, and see if that's the case, in which case hopefully some bolts underneath there and I'm looking good as new. But I'm not just stopping with the front bumper. I'm going to attempt to finish the fenders. Now, for those of you that have been watching the channel, you know I put these on a while ago, and I wanted to get them painted before I put them all together, but because I had to do the timing chain ran $5,000. Wife's not really letting me do the paint on the fenders anytime soon, so I'd like to at least make the car look a little better when I'm driving around. So what we're gonna do is, fortunately, these fenders fit pretty well. Now, for those of you that have dealt with fiberglass pieces before, you know it's a real crapshoot. You can get some that fit very, very well, or some that don't fit at all. These ones actually fit really, really well. I was really surprised. But there's one issue right here at the headlight where the fender doesn't quite meet with the line. And as I see, I can pull it and get it to line up, but it goes back into place. So I have a heat gun, and I've heard that if I heat this up, I can mold this fiberglass just enough to get it to look right. And I've had other people say that no, once this is set, it's set, there's nothing you can do. But we're at least gonna attempt it and find out together. So we're gonna hopefully get this all set up, put on the carbon fiber pieces and the final dress trim on the rear of the fender, and at least get the whole front of the car looking a little bit better. However, before we get to that, there's two things I do want to bring up. One, if you do like automotive, particularly GTR content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Two, if you want to support the channel, I do have the JD Archer shop. If you go to jdarcher.bigcartel.com, you can see a limited selection of hats, t-shirts, and hoodies I've designed that are for sale. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start working on the GTR. Before we get started, for those of you that have seen all my other videos where I show you how to work on, well, any car, the first thing I like to do is run you through everything you're going to need to get this project done. That way, if this is something you need to do on your car, you're going to know every part and tool you need before you get started. And that way you don't ever find yourself in a situation where you got your car halfway apart and you need something, so you're calling up your buddies to give you a ride to Home Depot or AutoZone to pick up whatever part or tool you need. Of course, everything that I'm going to be mentioning is going to be in the description down below. So if this is a job you want to do and there's something you need, just scroll down in the description, find what it is you're looking for, click on the link, it'll take you exactly where you need to go to get whatever part or tool you need. Now, to start off, we are going to have to get the car in the air. And unfortunately, the R35 sits so low, it's pretty much impossible to get a jack underneath it. Fortunately, I have discovered these. These are the Megan Racing low profile race ramps. If you have an R35 GTR, you need these. These are the only ramps I've ever found that actually fit underneath the bumper, so when you drive up, it gives you enough clearance, you can fit a jack underneath the car and get it in the air. So like I said, if you have an R35, or as we've also discovered, an R32, you need these. Of course, once it's in the air, we will be putting it on jack stands. Now, as I did discuss, we are going to attempt to mold the fender. So I did pick up a brand new heat gun. So hopefully this will be powerful enough. I believe it gets up to 1200 degrees. It'll be enough to help us mold the fiberglass. We also brought with me here a Dremel tool. I don't know if I need this. I might, because I am going to be installing that trim underneath the GTR badge. And if it's not big enough, I might have to router it out a little bit just to fit those trim pieces in there. And of course, standard set of tools. As you know, if you've been following the channel, I use Craftsman. They don't pay me to say that. I've just been using Craftsman for the past 20 years, and I like Craftsman. I'm also going to be using some 3M tape, which is a standard body tape, which should hold the trim piece in place. But because of the way the carbon fiber vents are, there's not enough of a lip to adhere them. So I'm going to be using a little bit of 2-part epoxy on the backside to kind of almost work like a tack weld to keep them in place until it's time to paint the fenders, and then whoever does will just be able to kind of router those off and then make it much easier for them to paint. But like I said, I think that's everything we're going to need. So let's go ahead and get started. Now that the car is on the ramps, we're gonna go ahead and jack it up. Something really cool that Nissan did for us GTR owners though is they gave us specific jack points on the car. I'm gonna go ahead and post a picture up here for you so you can see. There's actually 2 jack points, one underneath the engine, one underneath the differential, and then there's 2 spots both fore and back on either side for jack stands. So we're gonna just go ahead and get this in the air and use those jack stand points so I don't damage the car. I know it's kind of nice not having to jack up a car on the pinch welds, isn't it? All right, now that the car's in the air, we're gonna go ahead and start by taking off the wheel. One thing I did forget to mention earlier is while the car's on the ground, you wanna break your lug nuts loose. Otherwise, when the car's in the air, the wheel's gonna turn, makes it a lot harder. So we're gonna go ahead and take this wheel off, take the other wheel off, and then we're gonna start working back here. One thing I forgot to mention too when I was talking about parts, you're gonna wanna get a 21mm non-marring lug nut wrench. That way you can get all your lug nuts off without damaging your wheels. And once again, that'll be listed in the description down below if you need it for your car. All right, now that we got the wheel off, we got something to sit on, which is kind of nice. Typically what you do, so we're gonna start back here getting this trim piece on right here, which means I need to get this wire mesh out of the way. Typically you would have some screws holding the fender liner in right here, but I have since switched to these fiberglass fenders and the stock screws don't work. I just haven't gotten down to Home Depot yet to get some bolts to fix that. So you would have to get those out of the way. And then also there's some clips right in here, flathead screwdriver. You just go ahead and pop all those loose and then we can move this out of the way. If you have an interior trim removal kit, it might be a little better than a flathead, but since this is what I have, this is what I'm gonna use. Wire mesh is out. All right, so now let's see if this even fits. Darn close. Looks like I'm gonna have to do a little bit of routing, but not very much. All right, so I'm gonna use the router after all. I mean, it looks like I could probably force this in here and it'll work, but up top it's just a little on the tight side, so I'm gonna give it a little extra space just right here. And then that way, when I take the car in to get painted, it's easier for whichever party shop I go to get that off. Now, typically you'd want to wear some sort of mask or typically you'd want to wear some sort of mask or protection, but because I'm just going to be doing so little, I'm just going to hold my breath. Not exactly the most safe thing to do, but that's how I'm going to do it. Go. So now we just need to put on the tape and we are done with this part. All right, that's in. All right, so now I've got this one all re-taped up. This is on here nice and secure. I don't think that's gonna go anywhere. So now we go ahead and put the badge back on. And there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side off camera, but then after that, we're gonna move on to doing the carbon fiber vents. All right, so now we got the badging and the trim piece in. Time to turn to finally getting the carbon fiber vents in. As you can see, I put slits in here with the Dremel tool a while back. The reason why is originally in the Nismo edition, they claimed that these vents were to let the pressure out. So when the tire's spinning in the wheel well, it compacts air in here and it can kind of raise the front of your car and adjust your suspension for you. So the idea of this was it's supposed to get that pressure out. Nissan lied. So if you take a look at this, this is solid, so there's no way the air could get out. And on the Nismo edition, it has the exact same part number and the exact same part. And I've seen pictures with the fender off. There's no vents in here. So really it's just decorative, and I wanted to make it functional. So yeah, I just took a Dremel drill, I put some slits in here. That way the air can escape out, and then when I put the carbon fiber piece in right here, you won't see it at all. Real fortunate, I'm over here at Mike, and you've met Mike a few times, and he actually had some trim removal tools. These guys make getting those clips out so much easier, so I don't have to use the flathead anymore and worry about breaking the clips. So what I'm gonna do now is remove more of the clips so I can get this plastic piece out of the way, and then I'm gonna use some 2-part epoxy, and I'm just gonna kind of like almost like version of a tack weld from the inside at various spots and glue it in place, because there's not enough of a lip here for the 3M tape to actually hold it. And then that way when I take the car to get painted, all the body shop has to do is kind of, you know, router out where I kind of tack epoxy it in, and then they can take it out and it makes it easier for them to paint the fender. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this, this plastic piece off now. All right. All right, so now that that's out, let's go ahead and get the carbon fiber piece. Actually, before we install the carbon fiber vents, I almost forgot, I want to try and realign this fiberglass with the heat gun. So I'm going to try and experiment with that at least for a few minutes, and if we can get this looking better, all the much more better. I'd like to get rid of this kind of step between the fender and the headlight. Using gloves this time because, well, burning your hand probably isn't fun. So as an update, it looks like it actually did help a little bit. It looks like I just need to get right in here just a little bit more, and maybe I'll actually have a flush fender. All right, well, I'm gonna take a break from doing the other side, and I'm gonna attempt to get this permanently in place. This one actually had the worst fitment. The other side fits much better with the carbon fiber, but it is what we got. So what I'm gonna do is kind of get it in here and then try and lock it down, like I said, with some 2-part epoxy from the back side. The smell of our childhood. All right, so what we've learned so far is I have a new plan with putting on the carbon fiber vents. I thought I was gonna have to come at it from underneath and put some gobs of epoxy there and it'd hold, and that really doesn't work too good. But what I did learn is I could probably just run a thin line of epoxy, you know, there again, just spots, actually not a full line because they're gonna wanna come off later, and just kind of glue them to the fender with 2-part epoxy, and I think it'll work. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up enough epoxy, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move to fixing up the front bumper issues, put everything back together, go down, pick up some more epoxy, and then finish up the video with the vents. Heating up the fender over here actually did pretty darn good as far as reshaping it. I mean, it's not perfect still, but it's definitely better than it was. I may make one more run at that before I put in this side vent. But with that, we're gonna go ahead and take off the front bumper. Taking off the front bumper is super easy. I know a lot of people tend to avoid doing it, especially when they're putting on the cone intakes that go into this area and they'll just squish the filters. You don't need to do that. All you have to do is just take out these clips right up here at the top. There's a few more right here. Underneath, there's about 6 bolts, and this whole bumper slides right off. Oh, plus there's 2 bolts right here. And as you can see, that's where our issue is with the gap. I have a plan for that. I think it'll work because this bumper isn't really bolted to this fender. There's like this little white clip that really doesn't hold the bumper too well. I think that's the issue, is the little white clips. We're gonna take a look at it, fix up the lip issue, and put everything back together. Should just come off. And we got those ones right there. That's right, this one's got the oil cooler on this side, which makes it a little bit more of a pain in the ass. Now onto the other side. Now this side is actually much easier because the oil cooler is not in the way, which means it's easier to get at that bolt. All right, now we just gotta get the bolts underneath and we should be ready to go. All right, so here we are underneath the car. You're gonna see these little rubber pieces here. They just come right out. And inside here, there's some more 10 millimeters. And once you loosen enough of them, you should be able to just slide the bumper right off. Because this whole plastic piece comes off with it. So anything that's holding this plastic piece, you need to make sure you take off. All right, and the bumper should slide right on out. Don't forget to disconnect your DRLs if you have them as you take the bumper off. Oh, you know what? I may have missed. I forgot about that one. I did miss one on each side. All right, now that that's off, let's go and flip it over and see if we can figure out why exactly this lip is having issues. So yes, there's definitely missing bolts all throughout here. They must have just wiggled out. Actually, it looks like they're almost all gone. I don't even know. There's one. All right, I'm gonna have to see if I have some spares that'll work, that'll hold this lip in place. Aha. I have some bolts that'll work. Okay, yes, I know this shot is quite a dramatic change from the last one. Pretty much what happened was I was working on this car on Saturday and I quite literally ran out of time because I had other obligations. That's why, as you can see, I'm in a different location and I'm dressed quite differently. That's the fun thing about California. On Saturday it was 70 degrees, today it is 90. So I'm dressed a little bit more for warmer weather. Pretty much though, you didn't miss much on the previous work. All I did is when I realized I was running out of time, I just put the inner fender plastics back in and the front bumper back on the car. I showed you how to take that stuff off, so putting it back on is pretty much to reverse that. It's super, super simple. I also noticed a few things about that when it comes to using the heat gun and the gap here on the fenders, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. That being said though, there was one thing I didn't get to on Saturday that I definitely want to finish up today, and that is installing the carbon fiber vents on the fender so the car looks like it's complete. Now, fortunately, there's been a few days between Saturday and today, and I had some time to think about what it is I wanted to do. And I think I'm going to give the 3M tape another try on these fender vents. Now, I did try to use it before, but I found that there's just not enough of a lip in the holes here for it to really grip, and I was worried that they would fall off. I have a new strategy for how I want to try and do that, and hopefully it'll work. If not though, I did pick up some more 2-part epoxy, and I'll use that to adhere them to the fender. I want to try to avoid this though because I'm worried that if I use too much of the epoxy, the fender vents are just going to be on there so strong that whoever I take this car to have the fenders either paint matched or I repaint the whole car a different color, it's going to be too hard for them to get off of the fender without damaging either piece. So that's why I really want to see if the tape will work. That being said, the day that I was working on this, I was really using the wrong epoxy. You really want to try and get this Loctite because it comes with these two little nozzles right here. And these are awesome because you attach them to the plunger, and when you squeeze the epoxy through, it mixes through here and comes out in a nice little bead. It probably would have been a lot easier to get a dab on the back side of the fender with this instead of trying to use a stick, and it kept trying to fall back on me. So when working upside down with epoxy, try to find this. But with that being said, I am going to try and get this installed with the 3M tape, and maybe we'll get lucky. The first thing I'm going to do before I truly commit to this is do a dry fit, because at least on the passenger side, it wasn't really fitting great, and I still had to router out some of the holes. So I'm just going to kind of take a look here. Now, if I remember right, yeah, the driver's side fits way better than the passenger side did. Looks like I don't need to modify this at all. So I'm gonna try and put some 3M tape. Now, originally when I tried to put this on, I put a strip here, tried to put a strip along here, here, and here, and it didn't work. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it into smaller kind of like dashes and kind of put it along this lip and see if I can't get this to stick on without the need for epoxy. So one of the things that's really annoying about this 3M tape is, yes, it is good and sticky, but it really sticks to this little red backing. So it's a pain in the ass. I would much rather be able to like lay it on something and then peel off the red backing easily, but that's not how this works. So I want to peel just enough of this. Like I said, I want to cut it into little dashes and see if I just can't put little pieces along here. Although I may put a full strip right there. I think that'll work real well. It's amazing, this stuff sticks more to me than it does the carbon fiber piece. So here it is. I've put the tape all along here. As you can see, the issue is it all recesses. So it's really hard to use a lot of the lip on this. So really just this very outer lip is what's actually making contact with the body. But I put a lot on here, and with any luck, it'll be enough to hold until I get the car painted. So let's go ahead and give it a try. Yeah, that's a no. So I'm gonna have to use the epoxy. The plan is I'm just gonna use 4 little dots and hope it's enough right now. I'm gonna put one right here at the tip, right here, right here, right here, and hopefully that's enough to hold. Now this does take 5 minutes to set. So as you saw, the passenger side, when you stick it in, it actually fits in real nice and easy. I have some tape there to hold it in place, even though it really doesn't need it. And then I'm gonna work on the passenger side, hopefully before it hardens in the syringe tip here. That way I only have to use one. And I'll basically hold it in place with this tape. That way, if I walk away, it doesn't fall out or slide or move. So let's go ahead and see how this does. Lip. All right, on to the other side. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes. According to the directions, this epoxy is supposed to set in 5 minutes, be usable in 20. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the tape off on this side and just kind of see how strong it is. The other side, I'm still letting sit for a while because, like I said, it doesn't really fit that great into the hole. It's a little bit off. So I'm gonna let that sit for a little while longer, but let's see how this side does. All right, it feels like it's on there. Now, like I said, I've only tacked it in 4 places, here, 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 and here. So it doesn't feel like, as you can see, there's still a little bit of wobble in it. I don't think it's gonna fly off while driving. I'm gonna go ahead and let it sit overnight. Maybe I'll come back out and test it tomorrow, see if it's a little bit harder, a little bit better. If not, I'll just kind of pry it off of the fender just to be safe so I don't lose it, and just wait till I'm ready to finish the fender. But it is much nicer to have it on there. And there it is, a little bit of a refresh on the R35 GTR. A few things to note about this particular process. One, when I decided to work on the front lip, as you saw, it's really sagging, and I've really managed to kind of tighten that up. Literally, the bolts that hold the lip to the bumper just wiggled out over time, and pretty much there's only about 3 of them holding in place. So those have been redone. Now, if you need to do that to your car, you actually don't need to take the front bumper off. You can just jack it up and you can actually see where all the bolts are. However, you may need to take the bumper off for one particular reason. I noticed that right here and on the other side, I was missing a clip. So the next time I take my front bumper off, I'm gonna replace those clips, but I don't feel like going through the effort of taking the whole thing apart just for those 2 clips. Just the next time I'm in there, I'm gonna do it. So you may need to take your bumper off if you're missing those clips. But it is very quick and easy to fix that issue. 2, I did manage to close up this gap right here between the bumper and the fender on this side. It's just the clip wasn't aligned properly on the fender. Now, if you look over here on the passenger side, there's still a pretty good gap, and I figured out why. It's because that clip that goes into the fender that the screw that comes through the bumper attaches to works its way out because I didn't router the hole big enough. So once again, the next time I take the front bumper off for whatever reason, I'm just gonna remember that's an issue. I'm gonna router the hole out a little bit more and then just epoxy that sucker in there, and that should close up that gap without an issue. So if you've got a GTR that even has stock fenders and is suffering from that gap, it's probably either that clip is stripped out or broken. So that's where you wanna look if you're suffering from this issue. Taking a step back to the carbon fiber vents definitely makes the car look more complete. Using just the epoxy to tack it in there, I think it's gonna be strong enough to hold because there's really not a lot of forces on this, especially because I don't plan on doing any track days anytime soon. If I do, I'll tape them down before I go. And hopefully, because I only tacked it in the corners, when it does come time to paint the fender, whoever does the work will be able to get it off without that much of an issue. Now, there was one thing that was a bit of a surprise, and that was this right here. If you remember on the first day, I wanted to make this fender line up with this line on the headlight, and I used a heat gun, and it actually worked. I was able to mold it so it fit great. However, that was on Saturday. When I came out here on Sunday, I noticed that the fender had returned to its original shape. Now, the way I can figure it is there's only 2 reasons for this. One, because I had heated up and I molded it, maybe it didn't completely reset, so unless I found something to jam in there to keep it in its proper shape and leave it overnight, maybe it would have held its shape. The other thing is maybe, because the resin on the fiberglass is cured, there's nothing I can do. I was able to just kind of heat it up and it made it softer to bend, but it was always going to return to its original shape no matter what I did. If you're a body guy who knows fiberglass, post in the comment section down below. Let me know which it is, because those are my 2 theories, or I could just be completely wrong on both. That being said, one day this car will go to a body shop for paint, and I'll leave it up to them to fix it. Either they'll know a way to remold this fiberglass just enough to get it to look right, or they may just have to use some Bondo or some filler, just kind of line up this line so it looks good. But whenever you play with a fiberglass aftermarket piece, that's always a possibility. They never fit perfectly, and you'll always need a body shop unless you're a pro to make it look 100%. Now, taking a step back to here, adding this trim in was a great move. It looks so much better, so much cleaner, so much finished, where the mesh that came with the fender looked very cheap and very amateur. So I'm very glad I got that done. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the refresh on the front end of the car. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go hit that thumbs up button to let me know. It does help the channel out a lot. Like I said, if you do want to see automotive, particularly GTR content in the future, go and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on all forms of social media, which include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And there'll be links to all those in the description down below. As I did say also, if this is something you want to do to your car, I will have a link to all the parts and tools used in this video in the description down below. Now, if you have any questions or you feel there's anything I've missed in this video, go and post in the comment section down below. I will respond to you. If you know maybe of a better way to line this up aside from the heat gun, and you have more experience with body work than I do, please set me straight. Let the whole community know. I'm not exactly a good body guy. I'm really good at working on engines and mechanical stuff. Body stuff, I kind of dabble in. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, forget everything else, focus on the finish line.